Hello, here's Movie Fanatic Nate, stopping on by. This time to do something that I don't think I've ever done yet, is I'm coming at you to review a fan film. I'm coming at you to review Never Hike Alone, a Friday the 13th fan film, and this fan film has been touted as being like the best Friday the 13th fan film ever, and Friday the 13th being, my favorite movie franchise of all time. So obviously I was interested in to see what the hell they were going to come up with this fan film. So basically it's something that I would imagine was probably funded by donations or whatever. So I guess the intention of this fan film was always to just upload it online and just for people to be able to view for free. But at this point it's actually, they're actually, of course, which was probably in the plan the whole time, they're actually going to do like a limited Blu-ray and DVD release on stuff and special collectibles and all this kind of stuff, and through, if you'd like donate donate or whatever, then you get this certain stuff or certain tiers in this and that or whatever, which I'm sure was the plan all along. But originally it was meant to be, shot and just uploaded online for free, and that's what happened. It was uploaded, around Friday 13th, Friday, October 13th, 2017, and I think pretty much the day it went up, I downloaded it from YouTube and watched it, and always kind of intending to do a review of it, but I think it was just like, I don't know what, I was doing a lot of other reviews in October and stuff, and for whatever reason I don't know, I should have reviewed it, but I guess I didn't. But I always intended to review it, and that's what I'm doing today. So basically, this is touted, as I said, as being like, the best Friday the 13th fan film ever made, and it's a kind of a combination between normal, way of making a movie and found footage. But I found, the way the movie started to be rather an interesting, kind of creative mix between found footage and a normally shot movie. It revolves, you can see it for free. You've probably already seen it, but if not, I'm sure you can see it for free on YouTube or online. Just search Never Hike Alone, a Friday the 13th fan film. But it revolves around this kind of outdoorsy guy. It's kind of like, so it's just this guy, he's presumably has like a YouTube or some kind of internet blog site or something like that, where he does all these kind of outdoorsy vlogs and videos and stuff, and I guess he probably pimps products at the same time. Maybe he's told to pimp or paid to pimp products and stuff in his videos as well. But the premise of this fan film is it's like under an hour long. I think it's like, I don't know if it's 50 something minutes long or something. Is this guy basically just going out to the woods or whatever, which is the same kind of general area as Camp Crystal Lake. I don't think he knows where he's going is by Camp Crystal Lake at the beginning of the movie. He's just going out in the woods to camp and hike or whatever. And like I said, right when he gets to the place that he's going to park and start his trek into the woods, it's kind of right away, obviously the movie starts in a traditional kind of movie way, and with the following of the car, this old SUV towards the spot or whatever. And it should be said that there's a lot of what I presume to be like drone aerial footage at the beginning of this movie, and being a fan of, in particular, the first 7 Friday the 13th movies, huge fan of the first 7 movies, and there being, this is a gripe that, you can say, well, and admittedly I'll say is just, a personal gripe I have, and I don't expect anyone to, necessarily agree with this, but because of the fact that, in the first 7 Friday the 13th movies, there is like no aerial shots. I don't know, it just, for me, the aerial photography, which is obviously easy to do nowadays with drones, was kind of out of place in this movie, in my opinion. Obviously you're going to be tempted to really make your movie look so much more bigger budget with simply using a drone because it's available to you, but it's kind of like Jurassic Park, but just because you can doesn't necessarily mean you should. And for me, being a huge fan of the first 7 Friday the 13th movies, right off the bat in the opening credits, when the guy's driving to his location to park and then go hiking in the woods, like the aerial shots of him driving and just aerial shots of the woods in general, kind of, for me, being if this is a Friday the 13th, take a fan film thing, it really felt out of place, is what it boils down to for me. Like I say, it's tempting it's hard not to use a drone and get really, I'm not going to deny that the the aerial photography is good in the movie and that it's kind of epic and stuff like that, but in my opinion it doesn't really necessarily fit with what a Friday the 13th movie should be. That's one of my gripes off the bat. And I find that this guy who's basically the predominant, basically the only major performer until the very end in this movie, except for Jason, is the prominent actor in the movie. I think he does well. I don't particularly like the kind of necessarily the cocky the cockiness of the character, but the actor does a fantastic job, being very present and very real in this movie. But so I'm not having a problem with the actor. I'm having more of a problem with the character of the cocky kind of cocky young character that the actor portrays, which may or may not have been the actor's personal own choice. But right away when he parks the vehicle and heads out into the woods, it starts with he's running in the woods, and the coverage of him running into the woods and all the running and darting into the woods or whatever is really well done and photographed and edited. But my biggest problem with this scene is just it's just kind of some little rock. There's it's some rock tune plays over his running into the woods, and which again I just feel like is kind of out of place. It should be said that the opening credits of this movie, when he's driving to the location, the park where he's going to hike from, is permeated with music, nothing but music on the audio track. And the music for this movie, I will say, like the orchestral stuff, not the source music, but the orchestral stuff, is really good for a fan film. I think the music, they did a fantastic job, the guy who did the music. But having said that, like I say, when he jogs off into the woods and it's like this little bit of rock music or whatever, I just felt like very much with the aerial photography, I felt like the rock music when he's jogging and running into the woods was out of place as well. At this point of the movie, it is relatively impressive, and it's a combination at this point of real kind of traditional movie making where a camera that's not supposed to exist in the real world is following him and covering his actions and stuff, and a combination of that and him holding a GoPro and doing vlogs, if you will, for a web series this guy is presumed to gonna go home and edit and cut and upload to the internet or whatever. So not long after he runs into the woods and gets a nice, idea where he is or whatever, then we cut to a night scene, which is really, really wonderfully handled, where it's a kind of combination between traditional movie making and found footage movie making, where it's, you see him in the tent, a really nice establishing shot of the outside of the tent at night with a big moon in the sky. And then inside of the tent, he's basically just inside of the tent trying to pimp this one product, this collapsible shovel or whatever that he's probably been paid to pimp or whatever, and he's trying to remember the specifics about the particular product, and he screws up. And we go from the POV of the GoPro camera to just conventional film or conventional coverage of the character when he screws up, when he goes to try it again, and then there's this wild animal sound, a coyote or a wolf or something, and it's just really kind of creepy at that moment. And then it sounds like potentially maybe Jason or another creature or something, maybe captured the animal or something. But something goes outside the tent that night, relatively quick, early on in the the little fan film, that I think was really conceived and executed well, and kind of. What's cool about, what's kind of cool about this section of the movie is when, obviously, the cockiness of the character that I might not like is probably his on-vlog persona. That's what's really kind of covered cool in this tent scene, is that, the thing I find annoying about the character is probably only his vlog presence. When the character is not vlogging, then it's just normal character, and you're not playing to a camera, so he's not quite as cocky or whatever, which is something that should be said about this fan film, is that obviously you're going to have a different persona when the camera's on, his own vlogging camera, than just when it's off, and then he's just normal or whatever. So, that's one thing that should be said in regards to my, disdain for the character's cockiness. Well, it's only really when the vlog's running and he's talking to that or whatever. But that scene at night was, for my money, a little short. It could have been a little longer, that little spooky night scene in the tent or whatever, I thought was one of the best things about this fan film. I thought it was really conceived and executed well. Then we cut to the next day where in the daylight he ends up finding out that there's some marker or something like that where he sees something and he's led to some other spot or whatever and comes across this barbed wire fence with no trespassing on it, and he's just like, I don't know. No, at this point he doesn't know it's Crystal Lake yet, but there's this really, really cool, the first appearance of Jason in this movie I think was handled absolutely well, and when I first saw this last October I was like, wow, Platinum Dunes or whoever makes the next Jason movie should really take note of this, because at this point of the movie, the way, Jason is kind of shown in the background with this character being unaware of it was done really, really, really well. And then cutting between just him trying to figure out where he is and whether or not he should go beyond this no trespassing sign or not, and combined with Jason's POV looking at him and stuff was done pretty well. That part of the movie, I was, at that time when I first saw the movie, I was really digging it. For me, and then not long after, he actually makes the decision to, which is kind of ups the ante a little bit. He makes the decision, of course, to walk over the no trespassing sign and beyond into, the area that he's not supposed to trespass into, and that kind of ups the ante and makes it a little more, this stuff's getting real or whatever. And not long after, he comes across I think it was gathering firewood or whatever, comes across this huge sign which is covered with leaves and, sticks and all this stuff that says Camp Crystal Lake, and he ends up coming across this, I don't know, this place looks really run down, this main kind of, I don't think there's any cabins in this fan film. There's just this one main building, which must be an actual, like, abandoned kind of structure in the woods for real, because it's so dilapidated that I don't think they could have made it look like that just for a fan film. I think it really must have been like that and they got permission to shoot here. But I think this, from what I can remember, the movie, the only structure in this movie is this one main building which they use, and is the main the only building I think that he explores through or whatever like that. So this character becoming, aware of what's cool about the fact of this movie being partially normal traditional movie and then partly found footage is, if you do a movie with one person by themselves, it's like, how do you, with this person never talks, it's kind of like, how you ever it's gonna be potentially boring. So the way of having it be kind of interesting and to give information to the audience is by to have the character have a camera himself that he talks to, which really keeps the the movie, that which could potentially be a little more boring or monotonous or whatever, a little less so. So that's one of the best things about this movie in its conception and execution. So he, makes a fire in the freaking fireplace in this dilapidated this building, which is kind of like just a big room that looks like a lot of people would just meet for a gathering at camp or whatever. I don't think there's any cabins portrayed in this movie, just this one dilapidated building. And he makes a fire in the fireplace. He's doing a vlog in front of it, talking about what his brother told him about, Camp Crystal Lake and the story surrounding it, involving, the thing that happened in the first movie. So they reference 1980 and the stuff that happened in the first movie, and Mrs. Voorhees being decapitated, all this stuff. And not long after that, he does some more searching. It should be said that I think there's just a wee bit too much him looking around in the movie. But maybe not. I don't know. I guess you're just... So maybe just a smidge too much of looking around with the flashlight or whatever, and it's strange how he's looking around with the flashlight in rooms that have like beams of sun coming in, but I guess it's not. It's still dark portions of the the location, whatever. But not long after, later on, he ends up coming across. It takes a little bit from the reboot of Friday the 13th from 2009. He comes across what might be Jason's bed, or a room where a particular spot in I think it's the upstairs level of this particular dilapidated building. He comes across a spot where Jason might be, basically living or whatever, and he's got this postcard or this card that Jason got from his mom before everything went to hell or whatever, before Jason died as a kid or whatever. And at that point, he's just like, throughout up until now, Jason's kind of been stalking him, and just we've been just seeing bits and pieces of Jason or whatever. And up until now, there hasn't been any meeting, and this is like where the meeting ensues. And he gets up and backs up against, like I don't know if it's like a piece of big fabric or bed sheet or shower curtain or something, where Jason's on the other side, and he grabs him and the kind of the battle ensues. I mean, this movie is basically a hiker versus Jason, if you will, and the guy ends up being like thrown out this door, the second story building. This door has already been established as a place where you kind of haul up things and get things into the second story, supplies or whatever. And this is kind of, for me, I don't know. The first time I saw it, I don't think I was too blown away with the kind of the first confrontation or any of the confrontations between them necessarily one way or another. But the second time I saw it, I mean, I guess knowing more what to expect, the scenes where this hiker guy versus Jason aren't that bad. I guess done relatively well. It's kind of cool to see Jason versus someone other than Freddy, really. And a lot of people that are fans of Friday the 13th movies might say, well, this isn't, including me, might say, well, this isn't what Friday the 13th's like, and I've kind of said that already in regards to, like, the rock music when he's running or the aerial photography, and it's just like, well, to be devil's advocate, I mean, you say, well, so many of the movies do the same thing over and over, and, that's what I love about them, the first 7. But at the same time, I mean, in a way, you can't fault this guy for, people might say, well, this isn't what Friday the 13th's like. Well, you can't fault this guy for trying to do something different, and instead of doing the traditional bunch of people go somewhere and one by one they're off. I mean, it is kind of in a way, it is borrowing, if you really want to think about it, from the most recent Jason ventures, being, Freddy versus Jason, and also the 2009 reboot. It's really taking from those heavily. Because you've got the versus aspect, and then you've also got the aspect from the 2009 reboot of Jason just basically living at the dilapidated, abandoned camp ever since everything went bad. And not only that, but borrowing from the absolutely horrible thing, which was, I think, started in Freddy vs. Jason and continued in the 2009 reboot, which was what I would regard as an absolutely ridiculous. Well, not ridiculous, but stupid. I never liked the jacket look on Jason, and I was really disappointed when this fan film actually continued, that look, which, I mean, gosh, So that might be a little bit of an insight into, exactly which of the films he's a fan of, But, so obviously it's his right as a fan of whatever particular Friday the 13th movies he is to do whatever look of Jason he wants to do. But at the same time, I mean, he references stuff from his characters that are referenced in locations that are referenced from Final Chapter, and obviously referencing the first movie and stuff. So it's not like the guy only knows that Freddy versus Jason and the reboot exist, and also basically having the last person to play Tommy Jarvis in the end of this movie is also another proof that he is more aware of more Jason movies than simply Freddy versus Jason and 2009 version. So I think there's only 2 kind of versus scenes in this movie between this the hiker character and Jason Voorhees. At the first ending, I think, when the hiker runs away and ends up, tripping on that barbed wire with the no trespassing sign. I think that he walked over towards the beginning portion of the movie, or the fan film, only to scrape up his leg, and then, need to go back at night to the location or the house, the building, where to get his supplies and first aid kit to sew himself up and bandage himself up and be ready for another confrontation. It seems like the second confrontation, does it take place that night? Who knows? I just watched it today. I don't know why I don't remember. It's possible that the second confrontation, I don't know, it doesn't really matter if it takes place that night or during the day, but it might be, I don't know, it doesn't really matter. But there's one final confrontation between the hiker and Jason, which ends in a way that I kind of thought was cool, where I don't know, the hiker armed himself with an axe that Jason used earlier, and that got embedded into a tree, and he's got his back, or he's just sits, the hiker guy's standing there or whatever, and then he becomes aware that Jason's approaching him from behind, and he whips around to lunge at him with the axe, and Jason lunges at him with the machete. And it was a really kind of a cool way that the filmmaker, the director, did this part of the movie, where it's kind of like then you just have close-ups on each of their faces, and it's just like, we realized that the the hiker has been, impaled to some degree with the machete, and then we kind of zoom out from Jason where we see blood come out of the hockey mask, and then we zoom out to see that the axe is embedded in Jason. And then a kind of a cool thing, I will admit, they both kind of fall back and they do all these Sam Peckinpah cuts of like, hiker falling, Jason falling, hiker back and forth, and they both land on the ground and temporarily, whatever, disabled or whatever you want to say. And it turns out that the machete was actually, although it did puncture the hiker's body, it was, it didn't go all the way through, because this guidebook that he used at the beginning of the movie was in his pocket, and it kind of kept the machete from going clear through him or whatever. And then the hiker, at this point is like, gets up and then, takes a few steps away, only to like turn around and see Jason's, pulling the axe out of himself. And the hiker's like, at this point, fuck this or whatever, and runs off into the woods. And I can't remember, and then it cuts to like morning, and this part of the movie I think was kind of cool. Cuts to morning, he ends up at, presumably in the movie Crystal Lake, at a lake setting, and just dicking around or whatever. And then before you know it, of course, they do pretty much what they did at the end of the 2009 reboot, where Jason, they have him, splash out of the water and grab this guy by the head in a scene that's reminiscent of him coming out of the water in the first movie and 2009 reboot and stuff, and grabbing his head and basically crushing the hiker, blood coming out of his mouth, crushing the hiker's head. We see it from behind, the hiker's head, where his head gets just crushed. And to me, that's where the short should end, and perhaps maybe that's where it originally ended. I get the feeling when I watch this thing that may have been the original ending, and then maybe after, getting that part of the movie done and edited, maybe they got more pull or something. Maybe then they got they were able to get Tom Matthews, who played Tommy Jarvis in Jason Lives Friday the 13th Part 6. But who knows? I mean, maybe that was always the intent to do that or whatever. But I think the movie would be much better just ending on that high point of Jason actually killing, finally getting the jump on this guy and crushing this guy's head, and then just cut to black, credits roll right there. That would be ending at a really high point for me. Unfortunately, that's not what happens. He ends up waking up. The hiker ends up waking up in this ambulance, and in this, what I would regard as the worst part of this whole movie, where they do this shtick with this, nurse girl, and she calls this other guy Axel, of course, the character from Final Chapter. Well, it's not him, but I mean, they use his name, which is supposed to be like that character, I'm assuming, from Final Chapter. And this character, the hiker, had found an old Playboy in Camp Crystal Lake, and this Axel character in the back of the ambulance was looking at it. And I just think this line that he gives regarding a naked woman in the magazine was just so unneeded and unwarranted, and just like such just kind of student film, like just humor, and just, oh man. The end of the movie, really is just like, it would have been so much cooler if it would have ended after the head crush. But no, it kind of drags a little bit in the end of the back of in the back of the ambulance, and he's got. They even milk it a little more, where he imagines Jason appearing in the van, and they do all this kind of strobe stuff, and then he's out in the woods on the gurney, and Jason's gonna cut him, only to be like a shot of the needle going into the, whatever, the IV, pumping some drugs or whatever into the IV tube. And it's just like, oh man. And then before you know it, like Tom Matthews, I didn't even know it was him like right away when I first saw it. I was just like, oh my gosh. After a while, I'm like, that's Tom Matthews, who played Tommy Jarvis in 6. He's like reprises his role as Tommy Jarvis. He's now like an ambulance driver, or whatever, EMT person. And it's just like, I just feel like the ambulance scene at the end of this fan film was just milking it, and really, really, really unneeded. But I guess it was, for people who complain about like no body count in the movie, I guess it was a way for the filmmaker to put a couple, kill Axel and this woman at the back of the, ambulance, and a way to have Tom Matthews reprise his role as Tommy Jarvis and say the maggot headline. And basically the short, or it is a short, the fan film ends with Tom Matthews, the hiker in the back of the ambulance and Tom Matthews driving them safely away as Jason kind of just slowly walks on the road behind them, and a kind of a pan up into the woods and, you know, fade to black or whatever. I think it's like dusk at that point or whatever. And, you know, the fan film would have been much better in my opinion had they cut after, you know, the head crush. The stuff after that is just like, oh, it really brings it, brings the short or the fan film down for me. You know, if I was to give this fan film stars, I'd probably go 2 stars out of 4 stars for it. I did, you know, I thought it was a modest effort, and to be honest, I mean, maybe even the stuff before Jason is even, you know, before the verse, you know, before the hiker versus Jason is maybe even some of the best stuff, really. But, you know, like I said, I mean, first time I saw it, I thought the versus stuff was kind of, you know, roll your eyes-ish. But when I watched it again today, I'm like, yeah, it's not so bad. One thing that I'm not too keen about is, like, maybe Jason's footsteps are a little too heavy. Like, maybe if you're walking on, I don't know, man-made something or other, like big thumping footsteps are okay, but on ground it just makes kind of no sense or whatever. Maybe the Jason footsteps are a little too thumpy. These are just little nitpicks or whatever that I've got. Also, I'm not too keen when people make student film or, you know, fan films or their own home movies and stuff. This movie is kind of that really wide ratio thing where it's got black bars on your 16:9 display, and I'm not a big fan of that. I mean, even with real movies, I'm not a big fan of that, you know, that aspect ratio. Is just the plain old kind of, you know, dimensions that a 16:9 monitor is good enough for me. So these are my little complaints and stuff. I mean, all around, I mean, I don't regard it as being like this thing that is just completely and totally, you know, amazing or anything like that. So, as I said in closing, I mean, now they're offering, like if you make a donation or whatever, they're offering DVDs and Blu-rays and even like a little figure and collectibles and all this kind of stuff. But that's my review, which probably went on too long, almost probably as long as the fan film itself, of Never Hike Alone. Feel free to let me know, you know, feel free to go check it out if you haven't seen it, and come back and let me know what you think of it. You got to give these people props for making a go of it and going out there and actually doing something. And, you know, obviously I'm not going to love every single aspect of it or whatever, and might not like things about it, but, you know, they made a go of it. They actually did something. I mean, personally, I wouldn't waste all kinds of money and time on a fan film. I'd try to, you know, I'd want to just do my own rendition of something, you know, based off of a property or something or a genre that I liked, instead of, I just personally feel like, you know, when you get out of your teens and 20s and stuff, it's, you know, I wouldn't do fan films anymore. But, you know, again, that maybe this person is in their 20s, I don't know. But anyway, I'm just rambling. Thank you very much for watching my review of Never Hike Alone, a Friday the 13th fan film. And as always, we'll catch you next time.